A lonely rancher knocked. What the Apache woman did next shocked everyone. The desert stretched endlessly in front of Caleb Mercer, the lonely rancher. His cabin sat on the edge of the land, where the dry wind blew dust across the dry brown earth. Caleb had always been a man who preferred solitude. His cattle were his only company, and the wide, empty plains were his home. He never expected anything to change. The sun was setting behind the distant hills, casting an orange glow over the desert. Caleb had just finished his evening chores, the familiar routine that had been his life for years. He wiped his hands on his pants, the dust from the ranch sticking to his skin, and walked toward the cabin. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the quiet evening air. Caleb stopped in his tracks. Who could be out here, in the middle of nowhere? He hesitated for a moment and slowly approached the door. His hand rested on the handle, and he took a deep breath before opening it. On the other side, standing tall and strong, was a woman. Her dark eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She was tall, with long flowing black hair tied back in a braid, and her skin was a rich dark brown, weathered by the sun. Her clothes were simple but strong, leather and cloth, a mark of someone used to surviving in harsh conditions. She wore a belt with a few knives and a rifle slung across her back. She looked out of place, and yet she looked like she belonged. Caleb swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice rough from years of silence. The woman didn't immediately answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her presence commanding the space between them. "My name is Taya," she said, her voice calm, but with an edge to it, like the sharpness of the desert air. "I need your help." "Help? I'm not sure what I can do for you, miss." Taya's eyes locked onto his, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm Apache," she said, "and my people are in danger." The Apache were known throughout the West, fierce warriors, living in the rugged mountains and deserts. Their land stretched for miles, and they were a proud, independent people. But Caleb didn't know how he could help them. He was just a rancher. "You're far from home," Caleb observed, trying to hide the confusion in his voice. "I've come to ask for your help, Caleb Mercer. The enemy tribe has been raiding our lands, taking our cattle, and forcing us out of our own homes. We need help to protect our people." Caleb took a step back, the weight of her words settling in. He had heard the stories of the Apache's struggles, but he had never imagined he would be caught in the middle of it. He was just a rancher. What could he do to help? But something in her eyes told him this was no ordinary request. This was something bigger. "What do you need from me?" Caleb asked, his voice quieter now. Taya's face softened, just a little. "You're a man of the land, a man of the desert. You know these plains better than anyone. I need someone who can guide us, someone who knows how to survive out here. Your skills as a rancher will help us protect what's ours." Caleb felt a tug of hesitation in his chest. He had always kept to himself, never involving himself in the politics of the world around him. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't want to be a hero. But Taya's gaze never wavered, and Caleb could see something in her. Something strong, something determined. She wasn't asking for his charity. She was asking for his help because she believed he could make a difference. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind howling in the distance. Caleb stood there, his hand resting on the doorframe, looking into Taya's eyes. Finally, he spoke. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady. "But I need to know more. Who are we up against?" Taya nodded, her expression hardening. "The rival tribe is led by a man named Kenna. He is ruthless, and he will stop at nothing to take our land. We've been fighting them for months, but we need more strength, more people. And we need someone who knows the desert like you do." Caleb thought for a moment. He knew the land better than anyone. He could survive out here with just the clothes on his back and his rifle. But he had never fought a war before. He had never been a part of something this big. Could he really make a difference? The thought of getting involved in such a dangerous conflict scared him, but Taya's calm, unwavering presence made him feel like he had no choice. There was something about her, something that told him she wasn't asking for help out of weakness. She was asking because she knew it was the only way forward. Caleb nodded slowly. "I'll help you," he repeated, "but I need to gather my things." Taya's lips curled into a faint smile, and for the first time, Caleb saw a flicker of warmth in her eyes. "Thank you, Caleb Mercer. You're a man of honor." He didn't feel like a man of honor. He felt like a man about to walk into something much bigger than he ever imagined. But as he turned back toward his cabin to prepare, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something new, something that would change his life forever. Taya stood in the doorway watching him as he moved. The wind tugged at her hair, and she stood tall, waiting for the moment when they would both step into the unknown. She had come for help, but what she didn't know was that, in a way, she had come for something more. She had come for a chance to make things right, to protect her people, and maybe, just maybe, to find something she had never dared to hope for. As Caleb closed the door behind him, the night felt quieter than it had before. The desert stretched out before them, and though the stars above seemed distant, they were no longer quite so far away. The next morning, the first light of dawn peeked over the mountains as Caleb packed his saddlebags. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, but he had made up his mind. He was going to help Taya and her people. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but the thought of standing by and doing nothing wasn't something he could live with. Taya was already waiting outside his cabin, her figure dark against the soft glow of the rising sun. She didn't speak as Caleb approached, but her presence was as strong as ever. She was a woman who knew what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to take it. Caleb swung onto his horse, adjusting the reins as he nodded at her. "Ready to go?" he asked, his voice steady. Taya nodded without a word, already mounted on her own horse, ready for the journey ahead. Her horse was a sturdy creature, built for the harsh terrain of the desert. Caleb knew that this journey would not be easy. The desert was unforgiving, and they would need all their strength to survive it. But the thought of what lay ahead kept him moving forward. They rode side by side, the silence between them only broken by the soft clip-clop of their horses' hooves on the dry ground. The vast desert stretched before them, a sea of sand and rock that seemed to go on forever. Caleb had lived in this land for years, but every time he ventured into the desert, it felt like he was walking into the unknown. The desert had its own rhythm, its own rules, and only those who understood it could survive. Taya, though, seemed unfazed. She was a woman of the land, just like him, but with a fierceness and confidence that Caleb couldn't ignore. She moved through the desert with ease, as if she had been born to it. Her eyes never wavered from the horizon, scanning for any signs of danger. Caleb admired her strength, but also felt a quiet sense of awe. She was a warrior, a protector of her people, and now she was asking him to fight beside her. They rode for hours, with no sign of life except the occasional hawk soaring above them. The sun beat down, its heat pressing into Caleb's skin like an oven. Sweat ran down his face, but he didn't stop. Taya led them deeper into the desert, toward the heart of Apache country. The land was becoming more rugged, the hills rising sharply in the distance, and the air grew hotter and drier with each passing moment. As the day wore on, Caleb began to feel the strain. He was used to long hours in the saddle, but this was different. This wasn't just a trip across familiar land, it was a journey into enemy territory. He could feel the weight of that fact in every step his horse took. They were heading into danger, and they would need to be prepared for anything. Eventually, Taya pulled her horse to a stop near a cluster of rocks, and Caleb followed her lead. They dismounted, the sound of their boots hitting the ground muffled by the soft sand. "We'll rest here for a while," Taya said, her voice low but clear. "It's important we keep our strength up." Caleb nodded, grateful for the chance to stretch his legs. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. Caleb knew they would need to be careful as night fell. The desert was just as dangerous after dark, and they couldn't afford to let their guard down. As they sat beside a small fire, Taya broke the silence. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Caleb looked into the flames, watching the fire dance in the cool evening air. "Long enough to know the land," he said. "I came out here years ago looking for something. Maybe peace, maybe a place to call home. But out here, you have to survive on your own. No one's going to help you." Taya's gaze softened, and she nodded. "I understand," she said quietly. "I too know what it means to fight for survival." Caleb glanced over at her. There was something in her eyes that made him pause, something deeper than the warrior he had first seen. Taya had lived through things he could only imagine. She was more than just a leader. She was a survivor. They sat in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. Caleb felt the weight of the desert settling on his shoulders, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Caleb broke the quiet. "So, what's the plan?" he asked. "How are we going to take on Kenna and his tribe?" Taya looked at him, her eyes sharp. "We need to catch them off guard," she said. "Kenna's tribe is strong, but they are arrogant. They underestimate us, and that's where we have the advantage. We strike fast, hit them where it hurts, and make them question their strength." He had heard about Kina. His tribe was ruthless, feared by many, but Taya wasn't afraid. She had a plan, and Caleb knew that he would follow her lead. As the fire burned low, they spoke more about the coming battle, planning their strategy. Caleb had never been a soldier, but he knew the land, and that's what mattered now. He could guide them through the desert, using the terrain to their advantage. He could help Taya's people survive. But as the night stretched on, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing. He had stepped into a world he never imagined, one of danger, survival, and loyalty. He had come out here to be alone, but now, for the first time in years, he was part of something bigger. He was part of a tribe, a cause. When they finally settled in for the night, the stars above them were as bright and cold as ever. Caleb lay on the ground, his thoughts swirling as he stared up at the vast sky. Taya had given him a purpose, and now he wasn't sure he could turn back. He had to see this through, not just for Taya and her people, but for himself. The desert had always been a place of solitude, but now it was a place of unity, a place where Caleb found himself standing beside someone he had come to respect, someone who would change his life forever. As the wind whispered through the night, Caleb knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The battle was coming, and it would not be easy. But he was ready, and with Taya by his side, he believed they could face anything the desert, or their enemies, threw at them. The morning light broke over the horizon, painting the desert with shades of gold and orange. The wind had picked up, swirling dust and sand in every direction. Caleb stood beside his horse, adjusting his gear, his thoughts heavy. They had reached the heart of enemy territory. Taya had led them here, and now there was no turning back. The journey had been long and dangerous, but now the real test would begin. Caleb could feel the tension in the air as they approached the enemy camp. The rival tribe, led by Kenna, was known for its strength and ruthlessness. Caleb had heard stories of their raids, of how they took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. But now, it wasn't just a story. It was real, and Caleb was about to be a part of it. Taya's calm presence beside him gave him strength. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, maybe longer. She was a leader, and the burden of her people's safety weighed heavily on her. Caleb admired her resolve, but he also knew she couldn't do this alone. That's why he had come. They needed each other. Taya glanced at him, her expression determined but calm. "We strike at dusk," she said, her voice low. "It's our only chance." Caleb nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his rifle. He had fought his fair share of battles on his ranch, against wolves, bandits, and the unforgiving land. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about fighting for something greater. For Taya's people. For their land. For their future. As they crept closer to the enemy's camp, Caleb's heart began to race. He could see the movement of men and women, the horses tethered nearby. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and dust. It was a far cry from the quiet, peaceful mornings back at his ranch. Here, there was no peace. Only the sound of the wind and the distant voices of the enemy. Taya signaled for them to stop, her hand raised in the air. Caleb dismounted, his boots sinking into the soft sand. He could feel his muscles tense as he followed her lead. Taya was a master at moving silently through the desert. Her steps were light, almost invisible. Caleb, though experienced, could never move like her. He was heavier, more noticeable, but he had learned to blend in when necessary. They took cover behind a large rock formation, watching the enemy from a distance. Caleb's eyes scanned the camp, looking for any signs of weakness. He knew they couldn't charge in blindly. They needed a strategy, a way to catch Keena's tribe off guard. Taya had a plan, but she wasn't about to rush it. "Wait for my signal," Taya whispered. Caleb nodded, his fingers twitching around the rifle. The waiting was the hardest part. He wasn't used to being so still, to holding back when every instinct told him to act. But Taya's confidence in her plan gave him trust. She knew what she was doing. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert, Taya finally gave the signal. They moved swiftly, creeping toward the camp, using the shadows to their advantage. Caleb's heart beat faster with every step. This was it. The battle was about to begin. They reached the edge of the camp, where Taya stopped and signaled for Caleb to stay low. From their position, they could see the leader of the rival tribe, Kena, sitting by a fire surrounded by his warriors. The man was larger than life, his presence commanding the respect of everyone around him. He was talking to his men, his voice loud and confident. Caleb could see the arrogance in his posture, the way he held himself like nothing could touch him. But Caleb knew better. No one was invincible. Taya looked at Caleb, her eyes steely with resolve. "We take them by surprise. Hit 'em fast, hit 'em hard." He had no doubts about her plan, but he still felt the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just a raid. This was a fight for survival. The sound of a horn pierced the air, and Taya's signal came. With a swift motion, they both rose from their hiding spots and rushed toward the enemy. The sound of boots pounding on the sand echoed in Caleb's ears as he ran alongside Taya. He could hear the warriors shouting in surprise as they scrambled to ready themselves for the attack, but it was too late. They had caught them off guard. Caleb fired his rifle, the shot ringing out over the chaos. A man near Cana fell to the ground, and the camp erupted into confusion. Taya's men, hidden nearby, emerged from their positions, charging toward the enemy with cries of vengeance. Caleb's heart raced as he continued to fight alongside Taya, moving with a precision he had never thought himself capable of. The battle was fierce and fast. The sound of gunfire and shouting filled the air. Caleb moved with Taya, each of them covering the other's back. It was a dance of survival, a rhythm they had learned in the heat of the moment. Caleb had never seen Taya fight like this. Her movements were fluid, controlled, like a storm that swept everything in its path. Then, in the midst of the battle, something unexpected happened. Taya fought her way to the front of the camp, her eyes locked onto Kenna, who had drawn his sword and was preparing to make a stand. She moved with the speed of a rattlesnake, her knife flashing in the air as she faced her enemy. "Enough!" Taya shouted, her voice carrying over the sounds of the fight. Kina stopped, his eyes narrowing as he saw her standing before him, unafraid. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The two leaders locked eyes, each sizing up the other. "Why do you fight, Taya?" Kina asked, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "You know you cannot win." Taya stood tall, her eyes fierce. "I fight for my people. I fight for the land that is rightfully ours." Kina's gaze faltered for just a moment, but then he sneered. "You are a fool, Taya. You are nothing but a woman leading a dying tribe." That was when Taya revealed the truth that shocked everyone. "I am not just any woman, Kina," she said, her voice strong. "I am the daughter of the Apache chief, and I will not let you destroy my people." The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Caleb stood frozen for a moment, stunned by what he had just heard. Taya, the fierce warrior he had been riding alongside, was the daughter of the very chief Kenna had been trying to destroy. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting to protect her birthright. The moment of shock passed, and the battle raged on. With Kana's realization came confusion among his warriors. The tide of the fight shifted, and Taya's people pushed forward, overwhelming the enemy.
Caleb fought with renewed strength, his rifle steady in his hands. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As the dust settled and the last of the enemy tribe fled, Caleb found Taya standing alone by the fire, her face set in a grim expression. The fight was over, but the cost had been high. "You were right," Caleb said softly, walking up to her. "You are more than just a warrior." "I am not just a warrior, Caleb. I am a leader, and my people are counting on me." Caleb nodded, understanding now more than ever that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Together, they had won the battle, but the true fight for survival would continue. The night after the battle was quiet, the desert wind carrying with it a faint scent of smoke from the remnants of the camp. The stars hung in the sky like ancient eyes watching over the land. Caleb sat beside the dying embers of the fire, his body exhausted, his mind racing with everything that had happened. Victory had come, but it hadn't come without cost. The enemy tribe had been driven off, but many lives had been lost on both sides. Caleb couldn't help but think about how much Taya had carried on her shoulders, how much she still had to carry. Taya sat across from him, her face still set in its usual stoic expression. Her clothes were torn from the battle, and her hair was wild, a stark contrast to the calm she displayed. Yet even in the quiet, Caleb could see the weight she carried. It wasn't just the fight. It was the responsibility that came with being the leader of her people. "You did well today," Caleb said, his voice soft in the stillness of the night. "Your people fought with everything they had." Taya nodded, but there was no smile. "We've won a battle, Caleb, but not the war. The next fight will come soon enough. Cana may be gone, but his tribe is still out there. They will want revenge." Caleb shifted, his hands resting on his knees. "What will you do? You're the leader now, aren't you?" Taya's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. "Yes, I am. But being a leader is not the same as being a warrior. I carry the weight of my people's future, their survival. And I don't know if I'm ready for that." Caleb could feel the truth in her words. He had seen her fight, seen her lead in the heat of battle, but this was different.
The responsibility of her tribe, the weight of being a leader, was something he couldn't even begin to understand. None of us are ever truly ready for what life throws at us, Caleb said after a long pause. But you've already done more than most would. You've led your people through one battle, and you've shown them strength. You've shown them hope. Taya's gaze softened for a moment, and she looked away, staring into the fire. Hope, she repeated quietly. I used to think hope was enough, but hope doesn't always protect you. It doesn't always keep you safe. Caleb stood up and walked over to where Taya was sitting. The firelight flickered in her eyes, casting shadows across her face. Maybe, he said, his voice firm but gentle, but hope is the only thing that keeps us going. If you give up on hope, you give up on everything science is. Taya didn't answer, but Caleb could see the conflict in her eyes. He could see that she was struggling not just with the fight ahead, but with the burden of leadership. It was a burden that no one could carry alone. Let me help you, Caleb said. I've lived here long enough to know this land, its secrets. I can help you prepare, help you lead your people. You don't have to carry it all by yourself. Taya looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to read his thoughts. Then, slowly, she nodded. I never wanted to be a leader. I wanted to protect my people, yes, but leading them, it's a heavy burden. But you're right, I can't do it alone. Caleb offered her a small, reassuring smile. Then let me stand with you. For the first time that night, Taya allowed herself to relax. The walls she had built around herself seemed to soften, just a little. Thank you, Caleb. I didn't think I would find someone like you out here. Someone who would stand beside me, not just in battle, but in this. Caleb's smile faded, and he looked at the stars, feeling the weight of their words. I came out here for solitude, he said. I didn't think I'd find a cause worth fighting for. But I found one now. I'm not turning back. Taya looked at him, her eyes warm. You've become part of this, Caleb. You've made your choice. Caleb met her gaze, feeling the connection between them grow stronger. Then I'll stand by you, Taya. We'll face what comes next together. They both sat in silence for a long time. The only sounds the crackling of the fire and the distant calls of desert creatures. The weight of the battle was heavy, but it was nothing compared to the weight of the future they both now faced. But there was something about the way Taya stood by her people, her determination to protect them no matter the cost, that gave Caleb hope. In the distance, the sun began to rise, casting its golden light over the desert. The new day brought with it new challenges, but also new opportunities. The fight for survival would continue, but Caleb knew that with Taya by his side they could face anything. As the first light of dawn touched the land, Caleb and Taya stood together side by side. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it, together.